The stranger collapsed into Dalton Turner's arms on Main Street in Muskogee, Oklahoma, at 3:30 in the afternoon on July 14, 1883. Her pale face glistening with sweat and her breathing shallow as a newborn kitten's. Dalton had been leading his mare to the livery stable after riding in from his ranch, when he saw the woman stumble off the wooden sidewalk, her carpetbag falling from her grip and spilling its contents across the dusty street. He caught her before she hit the ground, his weathered hands gripping her shoulders as her eyes rolled back and her knees buckled completely. "Madam, madam, can you hear me?" Dalton asked, lowering her gently to sit on the edge of the sidewalk. Her head lolled to one side, and he could feel the heat radiating off her skin even through the layers of her traveling dress. The fabric was fine quality but dusty from the road, and he noticed her hands were blistered in places where gloves should have protected them. A small crowd began to gather, curious faces peering down at the unconscious woman. Mrs. Henderson from the general store hurried over, fanning herself with her apron. "Good Lord, is she dead?" "No, madam, just fainted, I think," Dalton replied, checking the woman's pulse at her wrist. It was rapid but steady. "She's burning up with fever, though. Anybody know who she is?" "Came in on the afternoon stage," said Tommy Weaver, the stable boy. "Saw her get off about 20 minutes ago. She asked directions to the boarding house, but I reckon she didn't make it that far." Dalton looked down at the woman in his arms. She appeared to be in her early 20s, with auburn hair pinned up under a small hat that had come askew during her fall. Her face, though flushed with fever, had delicate features and a sprinkling of freckles across her nose. She wore no wedding ring, and the quality of her dress suggested she came from some means, though her traveling alone indicated she might be fleeing something or seeking something new. "Someone fetch Doc Morrison," Dalton said, making a decision. He scooped the woman up in his arms, surprised at how light she was. Too light, really, as though she hadn't been eating properly. "I'll take her to my place. It's closer than the boarding house and she needs help now." Mrs. Henderson's eyebrows shot up. "Dalton Turner, you can't take an unmarried woman to your home. What will people think?" "They can think whatever they want," Dalton replied, already heading down the street with the woman cradled against his chest. "I'm not leaving her to die in the dirt while we worry about propriety. Someone gather up her belongings and bring them along." His small house sat at the edge of town, a modest structure with 2 bedrooms that he had built himself 5 years ago when he first established his cattle ranch. The main bedroom he used for himself, and the second had served as a guest room for the occasional ranch hand who needed a place to stay. He kicked open the door and carried the woman inside, laying her carefully on the bed in the spare room. The late afternoon sun filtered through the gingham curtains, casting everything in a golden light. Dalton grabbed a basin and filled it with water from the pump, then brought it back with some clean cloths. He had nursed sick cattle and horses plenty of times, and he had tended his own injuries and those of his ranch hands, but he felt uncertain as he looked down at this delicate stranger. Her breathing remained shallow and her skin burned hot to the touch. He dampened a cloth and began carefully wiping her face and neck, trying to bring down the fever. Her eyelids fluttered but did not open. He removed her hat and found her hair was damp with sweat beneath it. After a moment's hesitation, he began removing her boots, which were worn thin at the soles. Her stockings had holes in them, and her feet bore fresh blisters. This woman had been walking a long way before she ever reached Muskogee. Doc Morrison arrived within 15 minutes, his medical bag in hand and his round face red from hurrying. He was a portly man in his 50s who had been the town's only doctor for nearly 2 decades. "What have we got here?" "Found her collapsed on Main Street," Dalton explained, stepping back to give the doctor room. She came in on the stage. High fever, unconscious. Looks like she hasn't eaten properly in days. Doc Morrison examined her thoroughly, checking her pulse, listening to her breathing, looking at her eyes. He frowned as he worked, making small humming sounds. Finally, he straightened up and looked at Dalton. Exhaustion and exposure, primarily. Looks like she's been traveling hard for some time without proper food or rest. The fever is concerning but not dangerously high yet. She needs fluids, rest, and nourishment. Keep the fever down with cool cloths. If she wakes, try to get her to drink water or broth. I'll come back tomorrow to check on her. Will she be all right? Dalton asked, surprised at the concern in his own voice. Should be, with proper care. You did the right thing bringing her here quickly. Doc Morrison paused at the door. Any idea who she is? Not yet. Figured I would wait until she wakes to ask questions. The doctor nodded and left, and Dalton found himself alone with the mysterious woman once more. Mrs. Henderson and Tommy arrived shortly after with the woman's carpetbag and its scattered contents. The older woman pursed her lips as she looked around Dalton's simple home but said nothing about the impropriety this time. I found this, Tommy said, holding up a small leather-bound book. It fell out of her bag, has a name written inside, Willa Lancaster. Dalton took the book carefully. It was a journal, and opening the front cover, he saw the name written in elegant script. He closed it quickly, not wanting to invade her privacy further. Thank you, Tommy. Willa Lancaster. At least now we know what to call her. After they left, Dalton pulled a chair up beside the bed and settled in. He continued changing the cool cloths on her forehead and wrists, watching her face for any sign of consciousness. As the sun set and the room grew dark, he lit a lamp and kept his vigil. He had ranch work to do, cattle that needed tending, but something about this woman compelled him to stay. Maybe it was the vulnerability of her lying there, or maybe it was something else he could not quite name. Through the evening and into the night he sat there, occasionally rising to refresh the water or check that she was still breathing steadily. Around midnight, she began to murmur in her sleep fragmented words that made no sense. Have to keep going, she whispered. Cannot find me. Have to disappear. Dalton leaned forward, trying to hear more, but she fell silent again. Whatever had brought Willa Lancaster to Muskogee, it seemed she was running from something. He felt a protective surge that surprised him. He was generally a solitary man, comfortable with his own company and his work. He had been courted by several women in town over the years, but none had sparked anything in him worth pursuing. Yet here he was, sitting vigil over a complete stranger as though it were the most natural thing in the world. Dawn broke with golden light streaming through the window. Dalton's neck ached from sleeping in the chair, and his eyes felt gritty with exhaustion. He stood and stretched, then checked on Willa. Her fever seemed lower, and her breathing had deepened into a more natural sleep. He allowed himself a small moment of relief before heading to the kitchen to make coffee. The coffee was just beginning to boil when he heard a sound from the bedroom. He hurried back to find Willa's eyes open, staring at the ceiling with confusion. When she turned her head and saw him, those eyes widened with alarm. They were green, he noticed, a deep forest green that seemed to hold secrets. "Where am I?" she asked, her voice hoarse and cracking. "Who are you?" "Easy now," Dalton said, keeping his distance so as not to frighten her further. "You are in Muskogee, Oklahoma. You fainted on Main Street yesterday afternoon. I am Dalton Turner. I brought you here because you needed help. Doc Morrison has seen you. You have been very ill." Willa tried to sit up but fell back against the pillows, clearly too weak. "My bag. Where is my bag?" "Right here," Dalton said, retrieving it from where Mrs. Henderson had set it on the dresser. "Everything is here. Nobody took anything. She clutched the bag to her chest as though it contained all her worldly possessions. Perhaps it did. I need to leave. I need to find the boarding house. You need to rest, Dalton countered gently. You nearly died yesterday. Whatever you are running from can wait another day or two while you recover. Her face went pale and her fingers tightened on the bag. I am not running from anything. All right, Dalton said, though they both knew it was a lie. Are you hungry? I can make you some broth. I do not want to impose on your kindness any further, Mr. Turner. It is no imposition, and call me Dalton. He moved toward the door. I am going to make that broth whether you want it or not. Doc said you need fluids and nourishment, and I am not about to let his instructions go ignored after sitting up all night making sure you kept breathing. He left before she could protest further and busied himself in the kitchen. He had a chicken he had been planning to roast for dinner, so he cut it up and put it in a pot with water, carrots, onions, and herbs. While it cooked, he scrambled some eggs and made toast, figuring she could at least manage that while the broth simmered. When he returned to the bedroom with the plate of eggs and toast, he found Willa had managed to prop herself up against the headboard. She looked exhausted from the effort, but there was a determined set to her jaw that he found himself admiring. I can feed myself, she said when he approached with a spoon. Never doubted it, Dalton replied, setting the plate on her lap and handing her the fork. But you should eat slowly. Your stomach probably is not used to much food based on the look of you. She ate slowly, as instructed, and Dalton could see her fighting not to devour everything too quickly. She was clearly starving. When she finished the eggs and toast, she looked up at him with those green eyes, and he saw tears threatening to spill over. Thank you, she whispered. I do not know why you are being so kind to a stranger, but thank you. We take care of our own out here, Dalton said. And anyone who comes to Muskogee is one of our own until proven otherwise. Over the next few hours, Willa slept more, and Dalton tended to necessary chores around his property. He fed and watered his horse, checked on the chickens, and did some repairs to the fence that had been nagging at him. But he returned to the house every hour or so to check on his patient, bringing her water or broth when she woke. By evening, her fever had broken completely, and though she was still weak, there was more color in her cheeks. Dalton made dinner for them both, a simple stew with the chicken and vegetables, and brought 2 bowls to the bedroom. He sat in his chair while she ate in bed, and they shared their first real meal together. You do not have to tell me anything you do not want to, Dalton said as they ate. But if you are in some kind of trouble, maybe I can help. Willa was quiet for a long moment, pushing pieces of carrot around in her bowl. Finally, she spoke. I was engaged to be married, in Philadelphia, to a man my father chose for me, Arthur Pemberton. He was wealthy and connected, and my father thought it would be an advantageous match. She paused, her hands trembling slightly. Arthur was also cruel. I saw how he treated his servants, how he spoke to those he considered beneath him, and after we were engaged, he began to show that cruelty to me as well. Small things at first. Comments about my appearance, my intelligence, my accomplishments. Then he started telling me how things would be after we married, how I would not be allowed to see certain friends, how I would need his permission to leave the house, how he expected absolute obedience. Dalton felt anger rising in his chest, but kept his voice calm. What did your father say when you told him? That I was being dramatic, that all men expect certain things from their wives, that I should be grateful someone like Arthur wanted to marry someone like me. Her voice broke slightly. So I left. 2 weeks before the wedding, I took what money I had saved, what jewelry I could sell, and I ran. I have been traveling for 3 weeks, taking stages and trains west, trying to get far enough away that Arthur and my father cannot find me. Why Muskogee? Dalton asked. I ran out of money, Willa admitted. This was as far as I could get. I thought maybe I could find work here, start a new life. But I have been walking for days before I reached town, sleeping rough, trying to make my remaining money last. I suppose my body gave out. Dalton set down his bowl and leaned forward. Willa Lancaster, you listen to me. You are safe here. Whatever this Arthur Pemberton wants to do, he will have to go through me first, and your father does not get to make decisions about your life. You are a grown woman, and you have every right to choose your own path. Tears spilled down her cheeks then, and she covered her face with her hands. I have been so frightened. Every town I passed through, I worried he would find me. Every stranger's face made me think I had been discovered. I do not even know if I can legally break the engagement. Arthur said that by accepting his ring, I entered into a binding contract. That is hogwash, Dalton said firmly. No engagement is binding if one party does not consent, and you clearly do not consent. What did you do with the ring? Sold it in St. Louis. Used the money to keep traveling. Good, Dalton said. That should send a clear enough message. Now, here is what is going to happen. You are going to stay here until you are fully recovered, no arguments. Then we are going to figure out what you want to do next. If you want to stay in Muskogee, I am sure we can find you work and a proper place to live. If you want to keep moving, I will help you get wherever you are going. But you are not doing it alone and half-starved anymore. Agreed. Willa lowered her hands and looked at him with wonder. Why are you doing this? You do not even know me. Maybe not, Dalton said. But I know enough. I know you are brave enough to run from a bad situation even when everyone told you to stay. I know you are strong enough to travel across half the country alone. And I know you deserve a chance to build the life you want, not the life someone else chose for you. She smiled then, a real smile that transformed her whole face, and Dalton felt something shift in his chest. He stood quickly, gathering their empty bowls. You should rest more. I will be in the other room if you need anything. Over the following days, Willa's strength returned gradually. Dalton continued sleeping in his own room while she recovered in the guest room, though he spent much of his time sitting with her, talking. They discovered they both loved to read, though their tastes differed. She favored poetry and novels while he preferred histories and agricultural journals. They debated literature and philosophy, politics and religion, finding they agreed on some things and disagreed vigorously on others. Willa told him about growing up in Philadelphia, about her mother who had died when she was 12, about her father's increasing obsession with social status and wealth. She had been educated at a finishing school but secretly preferred the books she borrowed from her father's library. She had once dreamed of becoming a teacher, but was told that was inappropriate for a woman of her station. Dalton told her about his own past, about growing up on a small ranch in Texas, about losing his parents to illness when he was 17 and having to take over the family business. He had sold that ranch 5 years ago and come to Oklahoma to start fresh, building up his cattle operation from scratch. He had 6 ranch hands who worked for him, good men who helped run the day-to-day operations. He loved the work, loved the independence, loved the wide open spaces of the territory. On the 4th day of her recovery, Willa was strong enough to get out of bed and walk around the house. Dalton had gone into town to conduct some business, and when he returned, he found her in the kitchen, attempting to cook something. You should be resting, he said, though he could not help but smile at the sight of her standing there in one of her plain dresses, flour on her nose. I have been resting for days, Willa replied. I wanted to do something useful. You have been so kind, and I have been nothing but a burden. You are not a burden, Dalton said firmly, but if you want to cook, I will not stop you. What are you making? Attempting to make biscuits, she said, looking doubtfully at the dough she had mixed. I am not much of a cook, I am afraid. We always had servants for that. Dalton moved beside her and examined the dough. You need a bit more buttermilk. Here, let me show you. He demonstrated the proper consistency, his hands working the dough expertly, and Willa watched with fascination. You are full of surprises, Dalton Turner, she said. A cowboy who can cook. A man who lives alone learns quickly, or he starves, Dalton replied with a grin. Besides, my mother taught me before she passed. She said any person worth their salt should know how to feed themselves. They worked together to finish the biscuits, and the easy companionship felt natural, as though they had been doing this for years rather than days. When the biscuits came out of the oven, golden and perfect, Willa clapped her hands with delight. That evening they ate on the front porch, watching the sunset paint the Oklahoma sky in shades of orange and purple. The air was warm but not oppressive, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of prairie grass and wildflowers. I love it here, Willa said softly. It is so different from Philadelphia. Everything there was crowded and noisy and gray. Here there is space to breathe, room to think. It grows on you, Dalton agreed. When I first came here, I missed Texas, but Oklahoma has its own beauty. The land is good, the people are decent for the most part, and there are opportunities for those willing to work hard. I want to stay, Willa said suddenly, turning to look at him. If you meant what you said about helping me find work, I would like to stay in Muskogee. I want to make a life here. Dalton felt his heart skip. He had been dreading the day she would announce she was moving on, heading further west or south to someplace new. The thought of her leaving had created an ache in his chest he had not wanted to examine too closely. I meant it, he said, and I am glad you want to stay. I have been thinking about it, actually. The schoolteacher, Miss Harriet Owens, she is planning to marry and move to Kansas City with her husband at the end of the summer. The town will need a new teacher. You said you wanted to teach once. Maybe this is your chance. Willa's face lit up with excitement and hope. Do you truly think they would hire me? I have no formal teaching certificate. Neither did Miss Owens when she started. She just had an education and a willingness to work hard. You have both of those. I could introduce you to Mayor Hutchins and some of the town council members. They are already worried about finding a replacement. Oh, Dalton, that would be wonderful. She reached out and took his hand, squeezing it with gratitude. Her touch sent warmth through him, and he found himself not wanting to let go. The next morning, Dalton brought Willa into town properly. She wore her best dress, which he had cleaned and pressed by the laundry, and she had pinned up her auburn hair in a neat style. She looked nervous but determined as they walked down Main Street together. The town was bustling with activity. Wagons rolled past, cowboys tied their horses outside the saloon, women shopped at the general store, and children played in the dusty street. Willa took it all in with wide eyes, and Dalton realized this must seem very foreign to someone who grew up in a big city. Mayor Hutchins was a tall, lean man with a handlebar mustache and a friendly demeanor. He listened intently as Dalton explained Willa's situation, though Dalton was careful to keep the details vague. He simply said she was new to town and looking for employment, and that she was educated and interested in the teaching position. Well, Miss Lancaster, the mayor said, smiling at Willa. We would be mighty grateful to have someone with your background interested in teaching our children. Most folks out here do not have much formal education. Could you tell me about your schooling? Willa spoke confidently about her education, about the subjects she had studied, about her love of literature and history. She answered questions about how she would handle a classroom of children at different ages and skill levels, about discipline and curriculum. Mayor Hutchins grew more impressed as the conversation continued. I think you would do just fine, he said finally. The job is yours if you want it, Miss Lancaster. Pay is $30 a month plus room and board. There is a small apartment attached to the schoolhouse. It is not fancy, but it is clean and private." "I accept," Willa said, her voice filled with joy. "Thank you, Mayor Hutchins. I promise I will do my very best for the children of Muskogee." After leaving the mayor's office, Willa could hardly contain her excitement. She grabbed Dalton's arm as they walked back down the street. "I have a job, a real job, and a place to live. I can hardly believe it." "You earned it," Dalton said, feeling proud of her. "You impressed him with your knowledge and your character." They celebrated with lunch at the town's small restaurant, and Willa insisted on paying with some of the last money she had. "I will have an income soon. I can afford one meal." Over fried chicken and potatoes, they talked about her upcoming responsibilities. The school year would start in September, giving her about 6 weeks to prepare. Until then, she could stay in the apartment and familiarize herself with the schoolhouse and the curriculum Miss Owens had been using. "I will introduce you to Harriet," Dalton said. "She is a good woman. She will help you get settled." They spent the afternoon moving Willa's few belongings to the schoolhouse apartment. It was indeed small, just one room with a bed, a table, a couple of chairs, and a small stove. But it was clean and had windows that let in plenty of light. Willa stood in the center of the room, turning slowly to take it all in. "It is perfect," she said. "My own space, my own life, no one to tell me what to do or who to be." Dalton leaned against the doorframe, watching her. She had transformed in the week since he had found her collapsed in the street. The fear and exhaustion had left her face, replaced by hope and determination. She was beautiful, he realized. Not just in her features, but in her spirit, in her strength, in the way she had taken her fate into her own hands and shaped it into something new. "Willa," he said, and she turned to look at him. "I am glad you came to Muskogee. I am glad I found you that day." She crossed the small room and stood before him. "I am glad, too. You saved my life, Dalton, not just by carrying me home that day, but by sitting with me, by believing in me, by helping me start over. I will never forget that." They stood there for a moment, close enough that he could smell the lavender soap she had used that morning, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her green eyes. He wanted to kiss her, wanted it so badly his hands trembled with the effort of restraint. But it was too soon, and she had been through too much. She needed time to find her footing, to become who she wanted to be without the pressure of another man's expectations. So instead, he simply smiled and stepped back. "I should let you settle in, but I will be around if you need anything." Anything at all. Over the following weeks, Dalton found excuses to visit the schoolhouse often. He helped Willa clean and organize the classroom, repaired a broken window, built some new shelves for books. They spent long hours talking about what she wanted to accomplish as a teacher, what subjects she wanted to focus on, how she wanted to inspire the children. Harriet Owens proved to be a valuable resource and quickly became Willa's friend. She showed Willa all her lesson plans and teaching materials, introduced her to the families whose children would be her students, and gave her advice on handling the various personalities and challenges she would face. "Some of these children have never been to school before," Harriet explained. "Their families need them to work on farms and ranches, so attendance can be sporadic. You have to be patient and meet them where they are, but they are good kids, and they are hungry to learn when they get the chance." Willa threw herself into preparation with the same determination she had shown in fleeing Philadelphia. She studied Harriet's materials, created new lesson plans, and even started visiting some of the families to introduce herself. The people of Muskogee quickly grew to like her. She was friendly and genuine, with none of the pretension they might have expected from an educated woman from the East. Dalton watched her bloom like a flower in spring, and with each passing day, his feelings for her grew stronger. He found himself thinking about her constantly when he was working on the ranch. He looked forward to their evenings together, when he would ride into town, and they would have dinner or take walks along the creek that ran past the edge of Muskogee. One evening in mid-August, they were walking by the creek, the setting sun casting long shadows across the water. Willa had been telling him about a particularly challenging student she would have, a boy named Timothy who had a reputation for causing trouble. "I think he acts out because he is bored," Willa said. "According to Harriet, he is very bright, but the work does not engage him. I want to give him more challenging material, things that will capture his imagination." "You are going to be an excellent teacher," Dalton said. "Those kids are lucky to have you." Willa smiled but then grew more serious. "Can I ask you something, Dalton? Anything? Why have you never married? A man like you with your own land and business, kind and intelligent. I am sure there have been women interested." Dalton was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "I suppose I never met anyone who made me want to change my life. I was content with my work, with my solitude. Marriage seemed like something other people did, not something for me. And now?" Willa asked softly, stopping to look at him directly. "Now I am not so sure," Dalton admitted. He took a breath, deciding to be honest. "Willa, I know this might not be the right time, and I do not want to pressure you or make you feel obligated because of everything I did for you. But I need you to know that my feelings for you have become more than friendship. You have become important to me, more important than anyone has been in a very long time." Willa's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "Oh, Dalton, I feel the same way. I have been trying to convince myself it was just gratitude, just the natural affection one feels for someone who has shown them kindness. But it is more than that. When I am with you, I feel truly seen for who I am. You do not want to change me or control me. You encourage me to be exactly who I want to be. Do you know how rare that is?" Dalton reached out and cupped her face gently in his hands. "May I kiss you, please?" she whispered. He kissed her softly, tenderly, as though she were something precious and fragile. She wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back with equal sweetness. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless and smiling. "I am falling in love with you, Willa Lancaster," Dalton said. "I think I started falling the moment I caught you in the street." "I am falling in love with you too," Willa replied. "I never thought I could trust a man again after Arthur, after my father, but you have shown me what real goodness looks like, what real strength looks like. It is not about control or dominance. It is about kindness and respect and partnership." They kissed again, longer this time, and Dalton felt his whole world shift and realign around this woman in his arms. She was everything he had never known he wanted, everything he had not even known to look for. As summer drew to a close, Dalton and Willa courted properly, though anyone who saw them together could see they were already deeply in love. They attended church socials together, had dinner at the restaurant, took long rides out to his ranch so she could see his cattle operation. She was fascinated by everything, asking questions about the business, the land, the animals. She met his ranch hands, who teased Dalton mercilessly about being smitten but clearly approved of Willa. The school year started in early September, and Dalton watched with pride as Willa took command of her classroom. She had 15 students ranging in age from 6 to 14, and she managed them all with a perfect balance of warmth and authority. She made learning exciting, incorporating games and stories into her lessons, taking the children outside to study nature and science, encouraging them to think critically and ask questions. Within weeks, parents were commenting on how much their children loved school, how they came home excited to share what they had learned. Even Timothy, the troublemaker, had become one of Willa's most devoted students after she started giving him advanced mathematics problems and classic literature to read. But in late September, trouble found them. Dalton was in town picking up supplies when the afternoon stage arrived, and he happened to be standing outside the general store when a well-dressed man stepped down from the coach. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with slicked-back dark hair and an expensive suit. He looked around Muskogee with obvious disdain, his lip curling as he took in the dusty street and simple buildings. Something about the man made Dalton's instincts prickle with warning. He watched as the stranger approached a group of men standing outside the saloon. "Excuse me, gentlemen. I am looking for a woman. Auburn hair, green eyes, early 20s. She may be going by the name Willa Lancaster. Have you seen anyone matching that description?" Dalton's blood ran cold. He knew immediately who this man must be. Arthur Pemberton had found her, one of the men shrugged. "Maybe." "What do you want with her?" "She is my fiancée," Arthur said, his voice dripping with false charm. "She had a bit of a nervous episode and ran away before our wedding. Her poor father has been beside himself with worry. I have come to bring her home where she belongs." "That's so," said Charlie Henderson, one of Dalton's ranch hands who happened to be in town. Charlie looked over and caught Dalton's eye, raising an eyebrow in question. Dalton gave a small shake of his head, warning Charlie to be careful. "Yes," Arthur continued. "If you have seen her, I would be most grateful for information. There is a reward, of course." He pulled out a roll of bills, making sure everyone could see he had money. "Have not seen anyone like that," Charlie said flatly. "But then, lots of folks come through Muskogee. Hard to keep track." Arthur's pleasant facade slipped for a moment, showing the cruelty underneath. "I will be staying at the boarding house. If anyone remembers anything useful, come find me." He walked away, his boots clicking on the wooden sidewalk. Dalton waited until Arthur was out of sight, then hurried to Charlie. "Thank you for not saying anything." "That is Miss Willa's fellow?" Charlie asked, his face darkening. "He looks like a snake in a fancy suit." "Worse than a snake," Dalton said grimly. "I need to warn her. Can you spread the word to folks we trust? Tell them not to say anything about Willa to that man. She is under our protection now." "You got it, boss," Charlie said, already heading off to talk to others. Dalton practically ran to the schoolhouse. School was still in session, and he could hear Willa's voice through the open window, reading aloud to her students. He waited impatiently outside until the final bell rang and the children came streaming out, laughing and calling goodbyes to their teacher. When the last child had left, Dalton entered the schoolhouse. Willa was at her desk grading papers, and she looked up with a delighted smile when she saw him. "Dalton, what a nice surprise. I was not expecting you until this evening." Her smile faded when she saw his expression. "What is wrong?" "Arthur Pemberton is here," Dalton said without preamble. "He arrived on the afternoon stage. He is looking for you." All the color drained from Willa's face and she gripped the edge of her desk for support. "No, no, how did he find me?" "I do not know," Dalton said, moving to her side. "But he is telling everyone you are his fiancée who ran away, that he has come to bring you home." "Willa, what do you want to do?" "I do not know," she said, her voice shaking. "I thought I was safe. I thought I had gone far enough. Oh God, what if he tries to force me to go back?" Dalton took her shoulders gently, making her look at him. "Listen to me. He cannot force you to do anything. You are an adult woman with the right to make your own choices. You have a job here, a life here. The people of this town know you and respect you. They will not let some stranger drag you away." "You do not know Arthur," Willa said, tears streaming down her face. "He always gets what he wants. He has money and connections. He will find a way." "Not this time," Dalton said firmly. "I will not let him hurt you. We will figure this out together." They spent the evening planning. Dalton suggested Willa stay at his ranch for safety, but she refused. If I hide, it will only confirm his story that I am unstable and need to be taken care of. I have to face him and make it clear that I am here by choice, that I am not going back. Then I will stay here with you, Dalton said. He will not get near you without going through me. That night, Dalton slept on the floor of Willa's apartment while she took the bed. Neither of them slept much, both alert for any sound that might indicate Arthur had discovered where she was. The confrontation came the next afternoon. Dalton had gone to check on his ranch but returned to the schoolhouse just as school was letting out. He saw Arthur standing across the street, watching the building. When Willa emerged with some of her students, Arthur started walking toward her. Dalton intercepted him before he could reach her. "That is far enough." Arthur looked him up and down with contempt. "And who might you be, Dalton Turner? I am a friend of Miss Lancaster. Whatever business you think you have with her, it can wait until she is done with her responsibilities." "Friend?" Arthur sneered. "Is that what they call it out here in the wilderness? I know what you are, some cowboy who took advantage of a confused woman. Willa, darling, come here. We need to talk." Willa had sent the children home and now stood on the schoolhouse steps, her face pale but resolute. "I have nothing to say to you, Arthur. You need to leave." "Willa, be reasonable," Arthur said, his voice taking on a patronizing tone. "Your father is worried sick. This little rebellion has gone on long enough. It is time to come home and fulfill your obligations." "I have no obligations to you," Willa said clearly. "I ended our engagement when I left Philadelphia. I am not going back." Arthur's face darkened with anger. "You cannot just end an engagement. We had an agreement. Your father gave his word." "My father does not speak for me," Willa said. "I am sorry he gave you expectations I cannot fulfill, but I do not love you, Arthur. I do not even like you. I will not marry you." "You heard her," Dalton said. "She has made her choice. Now leave her alone." Arthur turned on Dalton with sudden violence, his hand going to his hip where he wore a concealed pistol. "You have no idea who you are dealing with, Cowboy. I can make your life very difficult." Dalton did not flinch. "And you have no idea who you are dealing with. This is Oklahoma territory, not Philadelphia. We do not take kindly to men who threaten women or try to force them into situations they do not want. You should leave while you still can." A crowd had gathered, including Sheriff Tom Bradford, a weathered man in his 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. He stepped forward now, his hand resting casually on his own gun. "Is there a problem here, folks?" "Sheriff," Arthur said, quickly adopting a reasonable tone. "I am Arthur Pemberton from Philadelphia. This woman is my fiancée. She had a nervous breakdown and ran away. I have come to take her home where she can receive proper care." "That is not true," Willa said firmly. "I broke off our engagement because he is cruel and controlling. I came to Muskogee of my own free will. I have a job here teaching our children. I am staying of my own choice." Sheriff Bradford looked between them, then at Dalton. "Dalton, you know anything about this? Miss Lancaster arrived in Muskogee in July," Dalton explained. "She fell ill from exhaustion and exposure from traveling. I helped her recover, and Mayor Hutchins hired her as our new school teacher. She has been doing an excellent job. She is here because she wants to be, not because anyone is forcing her." "Is that true, Miss Lancaster?" the sheriff asked. "You are here voluntarily. This man has no legal claim on you." "It is absolutely true," Willa said. "I am an adult woman capable of making my own decisions. Arthur Pemberton has no legal or moral claim on me. I want him to leave me alone." The sheriff nodded and turned to Arthur. "Well, there you have it. The lady has spoken. I suggest you head back to Philadelphia, Mr. Pemberton. We do not cotton to harassment of women in my town." Arthur's face turned red with rage. "This is absurd. Sheriff, this woman is not well. She needs to be returned to her family." "She looks perfectly well to me," the sheriff said, "and she is clearly of sound mind. Unless you have some legal document that says otherwise, I am going to have to ask you to leave her be." "You will regret this," Arthur said, looking at Willa with venom. "All of you, I have resources. I have connections. I will make sure this entire town regrets interfering in my affairs." "Is that a threat?" Sheriff Bradford asked, his voice going cold. Arthur seemed to realize he had gone too far. He smoothed his jacket and forced a smile. "Of course not, Sheriff. I am simply disappointed that you all are enabling Willa's delusions. But I can see I am not wanted here. I will leave. For now." He looked at Willa one more time. "But this is not over, my dear. Your father will not give up so easily, neither will I." He walked away, leaving a tense silence in his wake. The crowd began to disperse, many people stopping to speak to Willa, to assure her that they supported her, that she was part of their community now. Mrs. Henderson from the general store patted Willa's hand. "Do not you worry about that awful man, dear. We will look after you. You are one of us now." Similar sentiments came from others, and Willa was overwhelmed by the support. When everyone had finally left, she sat down on the schoolhouse steps, shaking with reaction. Dalton sat beside her, putting his arm around her shoulders. "You were so brave." "I was terrified," Willa admitted. "But I meant what I said. I am not going back. I do not care what he threatens or what my father does. I would rather die than marry that man." "You will not have to do either," Dalton assured her. "He cannot force you, and if he tries, he will have to deal with me and every other person in this town who cares about you." That night, they had dinner at Dalton's ranch, needing the distance from town to feel safe. Over steak and potatoes, they talked about what might happen next. "You think he will really leave?" Willa asked. "I do not know," Dalton said honestly. "Men like that, they are used to getting their way, but he has no legal grounds to take you anywhere. You are not married to him. You are not a minor. He has no authority over you. What if he gets my father to claim I am mentally incompetent or something? Could they have me committed to an asylum?" Dalton reached across the table and took her hand. "They would have to prove it in court. And you have an entire town of people who can testify to your competence. You have a job that requires intelligence and responsibility. You have friends and community members who know you are of sound mind. They would not get far with that argument." Willa squeezed his hand gratefully. "What would I do without you? You will never have to find out," Dalton said. "Willa, I know this is terrible timing, but I need to ask you something." "What is it?" He took a deep breath, his heart pounding. "Marry me. Not because of Arthur or because you need protection, though I will always protect you. Marry me because I love you, because I want to spend the rest of my life with you, because you make me happier than I ever thought possible, because when I think about my future, all I can see is you." Willa's eyes filled with tears. "Dalton, are you sure? You do not have to do this just to keep me safe." "I am doing this because I cannot imagine not doing it," Dalton said. "I have never been more sure of anything in my life. I love you, Willa Lancaster. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Willa said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. I love you too, Dalton, more than I can possibly express." He came around the table and pulled her into his arms, kissing her deeply. When they finally broke apart, both were grinning like fools. "We should do it soon," Dalton said. "Tomorrow even. Then you will be Willa Turner and Arthur will have absolutely no claim on you whatsoever." "Tomorrow," Willa agreed. "Let us not wait." They were married the following afternoon by the town's preacher, Reverend Martin, in a simple ceremony at the church. The whole town turned out to witness it, everyone wanting to show their support for Willa, and to make sure Arthur Pemberton understood she was truly spoken for. Willa wore a new dress that Mrs. Henderson and several other women had helped her make from fabric, donated by half the ladies in town. It was simple but beautiful, white cotton with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. Dalton wore his best suit and could not stop smiling as Willa walked down the aisle toward him. She looked radiant, her auburn hair crowned with wildflowers that some of her students had picked that morning. When she reached him and took his hands, he felt like the luckiest man alive. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Martin began, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of Dalton Turner and Willa Lancaster in holy matrimony." The ceremony was short but heartfelt. When it came time for vows, Dalton spoke from the heart. "Willa, I promise to love you, respect you, and support you in all your dreams and endeavors. I promise to be your partner, your friend, and your advocate. I promise to create a life with you built on trust, kindness, and mutual respect. You have my heart, now and always." Willa's voice was steady despite her tears. "Dalton, you saved me in more ways than one. You showed me what real love looks like, what real strength looks like. I promise to love you with all my heart, to stand by your side through whatever comes, to build a life with you filled with joy and purpose. You are my home now." When Reverend Martin pronounced them husband and wife, the whole church erupted in applause and cheers. Dalton kissed his bride thoroughly, not caring that everyone was watching. Willa kissed him back just as enthusiastically, and when they finally pulled apart, both were flushed and happy. The town threw them a reception at the community hall, with food and music and dancing. Willa danced with Dalton, with Mayor Hutchins, with Sheriff Bradford, with her students' fathers. She laughed more than Dalton had ever seen her laugh, her joy infectious and bright. Later that evening, as the party was winding down, Sheriff Bradford pulled Dalton aside. "Thought you should know that Pemberton fellow left on the morning stage, went back east, but he was making noise about coming back with legal papers and such." "Let him try," Dalton said. "She is my wife now, he has no claim on her." "That is what I figured," the sheriff said, grinning. "But I wanted to give you a heads up just in case. You two watch yourselves." "We will. Thank you, Tom." That night, Dalton carried Willa over the threshold of his ranch house, their home now. He had cleaned and prepared everything, wanting it to be perfect for her. She looked around with wonder, running her hands over the furniture, examining the books on his shelves, taking in every detail. "It is perfect," she said. "Our home." "Our home," Dalton agreed. He took her hand and led her to the bedroom. "Are you happy, Mrs. Turner?" "Happier than I ever thought possible," Willa said. "When I collapsed in the street that day, I thought my life was over. I was exhausted, terrified, alone, and then you caught me. You literally caught me as I fell, and you have been catching me ever since. You gave me a chance at a new life, at happiness, at love. How could I be anything but happy?" They made love that night with tenderness and passion, discovering each other, learning what brought pleasure and joy. Afterward, they lay tangled together, talking quietly in the darkness about their hopes and dreams for the future. "I want to keep teaching," Willa said. "At least for a while. Is that all right?" "Of course," Dalton said. "Your job is important. Those children need you. We will figure out how to make it work. And eventually, I would like children of our own," Willa said shyly. "If you want that too." "I want that very much," Dalton said, kissing her forehead. "A house full of children with your green eyes and your clever mind and your brave heart." Over the following months, they settled into married life with surprising ease. Willa continued teaching during the week, and Dalton helped her grade papers and prepare lessons in the evenings. On weekends, she would ride out to the ranch with him and help with various tasks. She learned to ride properly, to rope cattle, to mend fences. She loved being outdoors, loved the physical work, loved being part of the ranch operation. The ranch hands adored her, especially after she started cooking big Sunday dinners for everyone. She might not have been much of a cook when she first arrived in Muskogee, but she had been learning steadily, and her meals became legendary among the workers. In November, a letter arrived addressed to Willa. It bore a Philadelphia postmark, and she stared at it with trepidation before opening it. Dalton stood beside her, ready to offer support. The letter was from her father. It was cold and formal, informing her that he had disowned her for her disgraceful behavior and refusal to honor her commitments. He considered her dead to him and requested she never contact him or any member of their family again. Arthur Pemberton had married someone else, a more suitable young woman who understood her duty. Willa read it twice, then folded it carefully and set it aside. Dalton expected tears, but instead she simply looked thoughtful. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I am," Willa said, sounding surprised. "I thought this would hurt more, but honestly I feel relieved. He has given me exactly what I wanted: freedom. He cannot use family obligation to manipulate me anymore. He has cut the last tie binding me to that old life." "You are sure?" "I am sure," Willa said firmly. "That man was never really a father to me, not in any way that mattered. You and the people of this town have shown me more love and support in a few months than he showed me in 23 years. I do not need him. I have everything I need right here." Dalton pulled her into his arms, his heart full. "I am proud of you. You have come so far from that frightened woman I caught in the street." "That is because you believed in me when no one else did," Willa said. "You saw who I could be and helped me become her." As winter set in, bringing cold winds and occasional snow to Oklahoma, Willa discovered she was pregnant. She told Dalton on Christmas Eve, her gift to him wrapped in the news that they would become parents by late summer. Dalton's joy was boundless. He picked her up and spun her around, then immediately set her down gently, worried he might hurt her. She laughed at his sudden caution, assuring him she was not made of glass. "We are having a baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We are having a baby." "We are," Willa confirmed, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. "Are you happy?" "Happy does not begin to cover it," Dalton said. "Willa, you have given me so much. A home, a family, a purpose beyond just work and survival. You have given me everything." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Willa continued teaching through the spring. The town rallied around her, the women offering advice and making baby clothes, the men building a cradle and other furniture for the nursery. Everyone was invested in this baby, the first child of the union that had brought Willa to Muskogee. Willa finally stopped teaching in late May, when her pregnancy made it difficult to move around the classroom comfortably. She spent the summer at the ranch, preparing for the baby's arrival. Dalton was attentive to the point of being overprotective, constantly worrying about her health and comfort. "I am fine," she would assure him repeatedly. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. I am healthy and strong. Everything will be all right." On August 15th, 1884, their daughter was born. The labor was long and difficult, and Dalton wore a path in the floorboards, pacing outside the bedroom where Doc Morrison and Mrs. Henderson attended Willa. When he finally heard the baby's cry, he nearly collapsed with relief. Mrs. Henderson opened the door, smiling broadly. "You have a beautiful, healthy daughter, Dalton, and your wife did wonderfully. Come meet your little girl." Dalton entered the bedroom to find Willa propped up against pillows, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. She looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "Dalton, meet your daughter." He approached carefully, awestruck by the tiny life in Willa's arms. The baby had a tuft of auburn hair, and when she opened her eyes briefly, he saw they were deep blue. She was perfect. He sat on the edge of the bed and carefully took his daughter in his arms, marveling at how small and fragile she seemed. "What should we name her?" Willa asked. They had discussed names but never settled on anything definite. Now, looking at his daughter, Dalton knew. Grace. "Because she is a gift of grace to us. Grace Elizabeth Turner." "Grace," Willa repeated softly. "It is perfect." As little Grace grew, she became the joy of both their lives. She had her mother's green eyes, which changed from blue in infancy, and her father's quick smile. She was bright and curious, always exploring, always asking questions. Willa returned to teaching part-time when Grace was a year old, bringing her daughter to school with her. The students loved having a baby in the classroom, and Grace seemed to thrive on the attention. The ranch continued to prosper under Dalton's management. He expanded his cattle operation and began raising horses as well. Willa proved to have a gift for managing the business side of things, keeping the books and managing accounts with a precision that impressed Dalton. They made a good team in all aspects of life. When Grace was 3 years old, Willa became pregnant again. This time, she carried twins, though they did not know that until Doc Morrison examined her and heard 2 heartbeats. The news sent Dalton into a mild panic about how they would manage 2 babies at once, but Willa was thrilled. "Twice the blessing," she said, laughing at his worried face. "We will figure it out. We always do." The twins, a boy and a girl, were born healthy in April of 1888. They named the boy Daniel Emmett Turner and the girl Rose Margaret Turner. Daniel had Dalton's dark hair and Willa's green eyes, while Rose had auburn hair and blue eyes like her father. They were both strong babies with lusty cries and hearty appetites. Grace was fascinated by her new siblings and wanted to help with everything. At 3 years old, she was too young to be much actual help, but Willa always found small tasks for her, making her feel included and important. The house was chaotic with 3 small children, but it was also filled with laughter and love. As the years passed, the Turner family became a cornerstone of the Muskogee community. Dalton served on the town council and helped make decisions about the town's growth and development. Willa continued teaching, inspiring generations of children with her passion for learning. Their children grew up happy and healthy, surrounded by love and the wide, open spaces of Oklahoma. Grace showed an early talent for writing and spent hours crafting stories and poems. Daniel loved working with the animals and showed promise as a rancher like his father. Rose was the most adventurous of the 3, always climbing trees and exploring, always asking how things worked and why the world was the way it was. In 1895, when Grace was 11, Daniel and Rose were 7. Willa gave birth to one more child, another son they named Thomas William Turner. He was a surprise, as they had thought their family was complete, but he was welcomed with open arms by his parents and siblings alike. By then, Dalton was 42 and Willa was 36. They had built a life together that surpassed anything either of them had imagined that day in July 1883, when she had collapsed into his arms. They had a thriving ranch, 4 healthy children, a community that loved and respected them, and most importantly, they had each other. One evening in late summer, after all the children had been put to bed, Dalton and Willa sat on the porch watching the sunset, just as they had done countless times before. Willa rested her head on Dalton's shoulder, and he put his arm around her, pulling her close. "Do you ever think about that day?" Willa asked quietly. "The day we met, all the time," Dalton admitted. "I think about how lucky I was to be in the right place at the right time. How different my life would be if I had taken a different street that day, or if I had been 5 minutes earlier or later. I think about it too, Willa said. I think about how terrified I was, how lost I felt, how I thought my life was over. And then you caught me. You literally and figuratively caught me, and everything changed. We saved each other, Dalton said. I was just going through the motions before you came along, working, surviving, but not really living. You gave me a reason to live, a reason to build something more than just a business. You gave me a family, a home, a heart full of love. Willa turned to look at him, her green eyes bright with tears. I love you so much, Dalton Turner. Thank you for sitting by my bed until my eyes opened again. Thank you for seeing me, for believing in me, for loving me. Thank you for giving me this beautiful life. Thank you for fighting your way here, Dalton replied. Thank you for being brave enough to run, strong enough to start over, and wise enough to let yourself be loved. Thank you for being my wife, my partner, my best friend. Thank you for our children and our home, and every single day we have shared together. They kissed as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the Oklahoma sky in brilliant shades of orange and red and purple. Inside the house, they could hear the muffled sounds of their children settling down for the night, and in the distance, cattle lowed and horses whinnied. It was the sound of home, of family, of a life well lived. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Dalton thought back to that moment 12 years ago when he had caught a fainting stranger in his arms. He had not known then that he was catching his future, his happiness, his reason for being. But looking back now, he could not imagine it any other way. Willa had come to Muskogee broken and afraid, running from a life that would have destroyed her spirit. She had collapsed on Main Street with nothing but a carpetbag of belongings and the determination to survive. And Dalton had been there to catch her, to carry her home, to sit by her bed until she opened her eyes to a new life, a new possibility, a new love. From that unlikely beginning had grown something beautiful and lasting. They had faced challenges together: Arthur's attempt to reclaim Willa, her father's rejection, the difficulties of building a life from scratch in a sometimes harsh and unforgiving territory. But they had faced everything side by side, and their love had only grown stronger with each obstacle overcome. Now, as they sat together on the porch of the home they had built, surrounded by the evidence of their love in the form of 4 sleeping children, they knew they had created something special. They had taken 2 broken, lonely people and forged them into something whole and complete. They had built not just a marriage, but a partnership, a friendship, a love that would endure. The years continued to pass, and the Turner family continued to thrive. Grace eventually became a journalist, writing for newspapers across Oklahoma and eventually publishing several books of poetry. Daniel took over the ranch when Dalton began to slow down in his 60s, running it with the same care and dedication his father had shown. Rose became a doctor, one of the first female physicians in Oklahoma, breaking barriers and saving lives. And Thomas, the surprise baby, became a lawyer and eventually a judge, known for his fairness and compassion. All 4 children married and had children of their own, filling the Turner ranch with grandchildren who climbed the same trees their parents had climbed, rode the same horses, and heard the same stories about how Grandma Willa had come to Muskogee, and how Grandpa Dalton had caught her when she fainted on Main Street. As Dalton and Willa grew older, they remained as devoted to each other as they had been in the beginning. They took walks together every evening, weather permitting, talking about their day, their children, their memories. They held hands like young sweethearts, and their love remained evident to everyone who saw them together. In 1920, on their 37th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren threw them a huge celebration. The whole town of Muskogee turned out to honor the couple who had become such an integral part of the community. There were speeches and toasts, music and dancing, and enough food to feed an army. Dalton, now 67 with gray hair and weathered skin but still strong and vital, stood before the crowd with Willa, now 61 and still beautiful with her auburn hair gone silver. He raised his glass and looked at his wife with eyes full of love. 37 years ago, I married the woman who changed my life. She was a stranger who fainted on Main Street, and I was just a cowboy who happened to be in the right place at the right time. But from that chance, meeting grew the greatest love story I could have imagined. Willa, you have been my partner, my best friend, the love of my life. You have given me 4 incredible children, 16 grandchildren, and a lifetime of happiness. I would catch you again every single day if I could. Willa stood on her toes and kissed him, not caring that everyone was watching. When she pulled back, she had tears in her eyes but was smiling. And I would faint into your arms again every single day if it meant building this life with you. Thank you for catching me, Dalton. Thank you for sitting by my bed until I opened my eyes. Thank you for showing me what real love looks like. Thank you for everything. The crowd erupted in applause and cheers, and their children and grandchildren surrounded them, embracing them, celebrating the love that had brought their entire family into being. As the party continued late into the night, Dalton and Willa slipped away to their favorite spot by the creek where they had first confessed their love all those years ago. The moon was full, casting silver light across the water, and the air was warm and sweet with the scent of wildflowers. "Can you believe it has been 37 years?" Willa asked, leaning against Dalton as they sat on the bank watching the water flow by. "Some days it feels like a lifetime," Dalton said. "Other days it feels like it has only been a moment. But every single day I have been grateful that you collapsed into my arms on that street in Muskogee." Fate or chance, Willa wondered. "Do you think we were meant to find each other?" "I do not know," Dalton said honestly. "But I know that whether it was fate or chance or divine intervention or pure luck, I am grateful for it. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Willa Turner. You and our family and this life we built together." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the creek and the night sounds of the Oklahoma prairie. They had weathered storms together, both literal and figurative. They had raised children and built businesses and contributed to their community. They had laughed together and cried together and loved each other through everything life threw at them. And it had all started with a fainting woman, a cowboy's quick reflexes, and the kindness of a stranger who carried her home and sat by her bed until her eyes opened again. From that simple act of compassion had grown a love that spanned decades, a family that filled a ranch house with joy, and a legacy that would endure for generations. Dalton and Willa lived many more happy years together, always side by side, always in love. When Dalton finally passed away in 1928 at the age of 75, he died peacefully in his sleep with Willa holding his hand. She followed him less than a year later, her heart unable to continue without its other half. They were buried together in the Muskogee cemetery, under a tree they had planted together years earlier. Their grave marker bore a simple inscription: "Dalton and Willa Turner. He caught her when she fell and they built a life together, forever united in love." Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren continued to tell their story, passing it down through the generations. It became part of Muskogee's history, a tale of how love can begin in the most unexpected ways, how kindness and compassion can change the course of lives, how two people from completely different worlds can find each other and create something beautiful together. The Turner Ranch remained in the family, passed down from generation to generation, and every descendant knew the story of how it all began. They knew about the stranger who fainted on Main Street, about the cowboy who caught her and carried her home, about how he sat by her bed until her eyes opened again and saw the future they would build together. It was a love story that began with an act of kindness and grew into something legendary. It was a reminder that sometimes the most important moments in our lives are the ones we do not see coming, the chance encounters that change everything, the strangers who become the loves of our lives. Dalton Turner had gone into town that day in July 1883 with no expectation beyond conducting his normal business. He had no idea that he would meet his wife, that he would catch her as she fell, that he would sit by her bed and watch over her until she woke. He had no idea that this woman would become his whole world, that together they would create a family and a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. And Willa Lancaster had boarded that stage to Oklahoma with nothing but fear and desperation driving her forward. She had no idea that her body giving out on Main Street would be the best thing that ever happened to her. She had no idea that the cowboy who caught her would become her savior, her husband, her soulmate. She had no idea that running away from a life she did not want would lead her directly to the life she was meant to have. But that is how the best love stories work. They sneak up on you when you least expect them. They begin with simple moments that become extraordinary in retrospect. They grow from small acts of kindness into lifetime commitments. They transform two separate people into a single, united force that can weather any storm and overcome any obstacle. Dalton and Willa's love story was all of that and more. It was a testament to the power of compassion, the strength of partnership, the beauty of building a life based on mutual respect and genuine affection. It was proof that sometimes the right person comes into your life at exactly the right moment, even if that moment seems like a disaster at the time. Their story became a part of Oklahoma's history, told and retold by generations of families who descended from them, or who simply knew them and loved them. It was a story that gave people hope, that reminded them love was possible even in the most unlikely circumstances, that sometimes fate or chance or divine providence brings two people together who are meant to be, and in the end, that is what made their story worth telling. Not the dramatic elements, though those were certainly there, not the happy ending, though that was important too, but the simple, powerful truth at its core, that one person's kindness can change another person's life completely, and that true love, when it comes, is worth fighting for, worth building a life around, worth everything. The cowboy who carried the fainting stranger home and sat by her bed until her eyes opened again did so with no expectation of reward. He did it because it was the right thing to do, because someone needed help and he was there to provide it. But in doing so, he found the greatest reward of all, a love that would sustain him through the rest of his life, a partner who would stand beside him through every challenge, a family that would carry their legacy forward long after they were gone. And the stranger who fainted into his arms, who opened her eyes in an unfamiliar room to find a cowboy watching over her with concern and kindness, found not just safety but home. She found not just rescue but love. She found not just a place to hide, but a place to flourish and grow and become everything she was meant to be. Together, they created something beautiful. Together, they proved that love stories can begin in the most unexpected ways and grow into something extraordinary. Together, they built a life worth living, a family worth cherishing, and a legacy worth remembering. And it all started with a simple act. A cowboy carrying a fainting stranger home and sitting by her bed until her eyes opened again, ready to see the beautiful future that awaited them both.